Hello and welcome to the MISFORMAMA podcast. I'm your host, Abbie Halberstadt, happy wife, mama to 10, Bible-believing Christian. And on today's show, I have a fantastic guest to talk to you today about technology and opting out when you feel like the world's pressure is too much and you don't know exactly how to respond or how your kids should respond or how you should guide your children. She is an expert in this area, having done the research for you and also having lived it out herself and for her family. Her name is Erin Loechner, and we are going to talk to her in just a second. But I want to highlight for you today first our current sponsor, which is Yeah Baby Goods. You guys got to hear from them last week, and they are a family-owned baby goods company. They talked last week about how they integrate their kids into their family business and that their kids love helping fulfill orders and just being part of the family ethos of hard work and togetherness and cooperation. I love that. They make accessories for the best-selling $20 IKEA Antelope high chair, and they make it cuter and more functional. And you can find their cushions, their leg wraps, their silicone placemats on their website, yeahbabygoods.com. They also have silicone food grade dishware that we love, and they also have a restaurant kit which makes a perfect baby shower gift or even just a birthday gift for the mom more than the toddler that needs to have easy access to a clean eating surface, food scissors, and a cute little bag that you can zip them up in and take with you, throw in your bag. You can use the code MISFORMAMA, MISFORMAMA at yeahbabygoods.com for 20% off. Okay, friends, I have a wonderful guest for you today. Erin Loechner is here to talk about being an opt-out family, and I'll let her define what that is and how you too can become an opt-out family, or at least a version of it that works well for your family's ethos. Erin, thank you so much for being here today and giving us some of your time.
Thank you for having me, Abbie. I'm so excited. It's going to be great to chat with you.
Same. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your family, and then we'll dive into the topic.
Yeah, I am, I've been married almost 20 years. I have 3 kids, and we homeschool, so their ages are almost 12, 8, and 4. And we live in the Midwest. I'm a former social media influencer. I was an HGTV host back in the day, way back in the day, and left the internet. So I'm a bit out of the loop. I haven't been sort of involved in internet culture in a couple of years, and which is a lot of where this book stemmed from. So it's been a wild ride, that's for sure.
Wow. Okay. So not involved in internet culture. That makes you a very, very rare unicorn, sparkly something that doesn't exist very much of anymore. And I'm including myself in the part that does exist so much because the Lord has called me to be very internet heavy at the moment, or at the very least, certain aspects of it. And I'm assuming we'll probably talk about that concept of wise choices and discerning in where you actually do choose to opt in. But I love that at the beginning of your book, which is called The Opt-Out Family, that you have this definition of what an opt-out family is. I feel like defining your terms when I wrote M's for Mama, and the subtitle was A Rebellion Against Mediocre Motherhood. Like the first thing I did up front, I was like, let's define our terms. What do we mean by rebellion? What do we mean by mediocre motherhood? So that you know what you're getting into and you know also what you're not getting. So kind of define those terms for me and tell me where that title came from and what drove you to think that the world needed this book, which I do think it does.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think what I wanted to make sure of was that I was able to relay the message that opting out is not all or nothing. It is a spectrum. There are a wide variety of ways in which the internet can add value to your life, and there are just as many ways in which it cannot. And so I wanted to make sure that this was not a book that people would automatically assume, I have to go live on the mountain in the middle of nowhere to be able to sort of practically put any of this into practice. And so the idea of an opt-out family is truly just, when I think of the algorithm, I think of the ways in which technology mindly presses us and pushes us along almost on a treadmill toward the next thing and the next thing. Opting out is simply pausing and reassessing at any point what your technology use is for your family. So if you're, at summer camp, you're sending your kids to summer camp and there is a facial recognition feature or the app that says like, if your child is in this photo, we will send you this photo and you can see if your kid's having fun or whatever. An opt-out family would just pause and ask, is that something that we want to participate in? Is that something that feels as if it will add value, as if it is God-honoring, as if it is something that aligns with our beliefs? That's an opt-out family. And your answer to that will absolutely differ. I think the only right answer, really the only wrong answer, I should say, is just to not question it at all. So an opt-out is someone that is going to reassess, yes, if this is the technology that is available, if this is the future that technology sort of says is inevitable, we have to stop and ask ourselves, is this the future that we even want?
Oh, 100% agree. And I love that you're kind of, your dedication at the beginning of your book says, for the brave, bold, unapologetic parents, and for the revolutionary generation, they're not afraid to raise. Get chills just thinking about that, because I am a huge fan of not being abrasive or judgmental or unkind, but instead not feeling like we have to backpedal and give a lot of excuses for the convictions that we have. So as someone who was formerly an HGTV host, as someone who was a influencer, I really, really dislike that term so much. I know that that's what the position of being on the internet and sharing either about products or about your life or about convictions or writing books and talking about them, that's what it's come to be called. And I think I feel a little skeevy about the term because we all kind of associate it with a stereotype, which we do with all jobs, of someone who's like, girl, you need, I'm obsessed. I bought it in all 5 colors. You need it in all 5 colors too, kind of thing. As opposed to someone who is organically sharing and maybe influencing someone that they don't even realize that they'll never hear from, that they never get a commission from, kind of thing. So in that sense, it can be good. But what was your kind of jumping off point for walking away from that altogether?
And I agree. I think it's a terrible term. And I think it also, thank you also for just the encouragement. I think my goal is to be bold in this message because I want to know, I think the narrative is very much digital well-being and balance and mindfulness, and all of that is great. But I want for a family that is curious, if they can opt out, I want them to know that they can, and I want them to have the tools to do it, because I don't believe this is an area in which many of us can sort of tiptoe. And for me, my trajectory away from social media, I wish there was, the tidy before and after. I wish there was a light bulb moment. There were many moments in which I thought this is no longer a place that I can justify a lot of the time that I'm spending here. This is not a place that this is rocky soil, and I don't feel like I'm called to plant anything here. There were many, many of those instances. I think for me, I recognized very early on that, and my husband worked in Apple ad agency as well, so we're very familiar with the algorithm. But we knew that getting it's not a question of self-control of how much tech usage you're using, whether or not you're tied to your smartphone or not. It's not a question of how much willpower you have. This is that you are sort of opting into something that you can't control. And when we look at this from a biblical perspective, it is about, who would build the tower without counting the cost. And when I looked at social media in that way, I didn't want to build a tower there because the cost was greater than what I knew, because we don't control the cost. We don't even control where the tower is or the foundation of any of it. And so I didn't really want to put a lot of time or stock in that space. And I think certainly the tipping point for me was recognizing that I didn't want my children to either. And I think like all parents, we sort of ask ourselves, are we modeling the behavior we want to see in our kids? And the change has to come from us. And so for me, I thought, if I want to teach my children, not even teach them, if I want to show them that there is another way to exist outside of social media and to have a vibrant social life that feels full, where there are opportunities and you can still do work that you love, that you're passionate about, I'm going to do that first and I'm going to prove it to them. And so that's really why I walked away, was for the bulk. It was for my family. It was for my kids, not in the way that I think there was harm done, but in a way that you can kind of foresee the future and say, like, this is what I want. This is what I want things to look like in 5 to 10 years. Let's start now.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. And as someone who has found herself almost somewhat begrudgingly still in the social media sphere, in that when I first got on here years ago, it was like, I don't even like taking pictures. I have words. I have all the words, but this feels weird to type them out this way. And who does feel like the Lord has said, prep the soil, invest here, even in the ways that it's maybe don't invest in the non-ideal ways. Like, there's no investment worth it there, but like, narrow down your vision to the purpose and the calling and shut out the rest. And I'm always encouraging moms to say, like, who are you following? What are you consuming? Why are you doing it? Ask those questions, kind of like you're saying, which could lead to, you know what? I have this person that I follow that really encourages me, but for me to get away from it altogether, I'm going to have to give that one up too and go find her in a different way. I think that's perfectly legitimate. And a really wise thing if that's what the Lord calls you to, but also if for whatever reason he calls you to stay, to be constantly saying, is what I'm consuming good, right, and true? Am I being so intentional to just kind of be ruthless about the cutting off of the hand that just makes me laugh or makes me feel validated, but isn't actually pointing me towards Christ?
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about the research that you've done in this book and kind of the things that you have, the conclusions that you've reached. And did you feel gobsmacked, or was it like something you already knew?
I think it's a great question. I had sort of my preconceived notions. It was far worse than I realized. I interviewed over 250 sources for this book, a lot of friends in and out of Silicon Valley, parents, teachers, schools, administrators, the whole 9 yards. And honestly, what I found to be the most staggering was that 71% of parents, this is a national statistic, not from my own research, believe that smartphones do more harm than good. And I didn't think the number would be that high, because 99% of teens have phones. And so it's a little bit, we're all sort of doing that math of just how bad is it? And is it something that we should be adapting to anyway? And do the pros outweigh the cons, and risk versus rewards? We're all kind of doing that math in our head. And it was very interesting to me that the conversation was so much, I think we overinflate the benefits. I do, of what we are experiencing online and in social media particularly. And we really undervalue the negative consequences. And for definitely what I found across the board is that we as parents are just as at risk as our children are when it comes to misinformation, disinformation, kind of blurring those lines between truth and reality. I think on social media, it's very easy to see that what sounds true sometimes feels true. And I think it takes a lot of effort to sort of peel that back and step out and opt out for a minute and say, that looks true and sounds true, but is it true? And biblically, is that sound? And is that a wise perspective that will lead to abundant fruit? Maybe not. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think that we think that as grown adults, we can sort of tango with this beast. And I think there are a lot of really great boundaries we can set in place to make that easier. But I was overwhelmingly convinced that participating in social media is putting a lot of faith in society and culture as a whole.
And you don't think faith in society and culture is where our faith should be, Erin?
I know. But at the same time, I can say all of that, and I can say I was we wouldn't be using this thing if it was all bad. We wouldn't be using smartphones if they were all bad. And so where I wanted to do with this book, I wanted to approach this from a very practical standpoint of, okay, there are a lot of things that the smartphone does very well, that the device does very well, that social media does very well. And I want to know what those are. I want to hack the system and use those in my own home, right? So I wanted to know from a Minecraft designer, how do you introduce a challenge that builds resilience but doesn't demotivate? I wanted to learn from TikTok. How do you provide this delightfully fun and engaging experience that makes it feel like the party's already going and you're just invited? I wanted to know from venture capitalists, how do you prioritize risk versus reward when making decisions? All of these things Silicon Valley does very well, and I wanted to learn from them. And so that's where my interest was. How do we put all of these sort of engagement strategies and techniques and tips and tricks? How do we pull from them and just do them better in the home and put them into use in the home and kind of steal that playbook? And how do we as parents be more engaging than the algorithm? And it's about building a family culture that I will say boldly, we have the upper hand. I think we take on this victim mentality that technology's out to get us. But we as parents can do everything that these platforms and apps are doing. We can do them better. We really, really can on many levels. That's what I want to say with the book.
I love that. And that's actually something that I have preached as well as in M is for Mama, is that we need to make real life more engaging than pinging noises and flashing lights and moving screens. That if we are faithful to invest in that face-to-face, skin-to-skin experience for our kids and show them just how delightful it is, even with knowing how addictive all of the other stuff is, and that maybe the real life stuff doesn't inherently have that addiction factor, but it has the life-giving factor that we want for them. That if we're faithful to invest in that, I think that you would probably agree that one of the greatest enemies to that investment is how easy it is to hand our kids a screen. So talk to me a little bit about what it looks like to buck that draw to get yourself 30 minutes of free time in favor of the quote, real life experiences.
Yeah. And to be honest, I think this is the beauty of the opt-out, the fact that everyone does it differently. I am so much more apt to give my child 30 minutes of Mr. Rogers than to give them my own personal boundaries. I don't participate in any algorithm online. So if this is something that is going to recommend a path other than my intention, I don't want any part of it. I don't want to be led in a direction that is supporting the goals of the tech bros rather than the goals of my own personal family and my value and my unit. So in terms of screen time, my children are older now, so it's not as much of a temptation to. Can I ask what your age range for your kids is? Yeah. They're almost 12, 8, and 4. Okay. So, at that point, they didn't grow up where screen time was part of our everyday rhythm, but I do know that there were absolutely times when we would get a bunch of documentaries from the library and we would learn about sharks and we would learn about, whatever. And so they were absolutely in front of the TV. I remember my son one year asked for, we have this very old school, it's a Nintendo. I don't even know the year. It's a Nintendo, like the old school. You have to blow on the cartridge and stick it in. Yeah. We had that. We were cleaning out the attic, found it. And so my husband cleaned it off, jazzed it up, and introduced the kids to Super Mario 3. Mm-hmm. And it blew my son's mind. And he was like, I love everything about this. This is so much fun. And they had, probably 3 days where they did nothing but play Nintendo. And it was wild. And I thought, this goes against absolutely everything that I believe and think. And this does not feel like the direction that I want to go at all. And so we brought it with us. My mother-in-law has a place in Florida that we visit every now and then, and we just installed it in the Florida place. And so it's there. They see it maybe once every year, and they want to play it all night. And one night we let them, and it was like, you can stay up as late as you want. You can be more engaging. There's no algorithm. We don't mind. So I will start by saying that we're not screen free at all in any way. Full-time screen free. It is not part of our everyday rhythm. And I don't think that we're at a place as a society where we have to add those disclaimers, but I also would never want anybody to think that living tech-free means living free of any technology. It does mean living free from technology. It does mean sort of being informed by this space, but not being unformed. We are very much not formed by technology in our family. So I do think of all the ways in which we can offer real life experiences rather than sort of the shortcuts of the 30 minutes of whatever. And yet I won't discount that we sometimes need 30 minutes, recognizing that it's probably going to go pretty bad on the other side when you turn it off. Anyway, I don't even know if that answers your question. I can't remember what it was, but I do know that for me, the personal boundary in terms of our children is we are raising them to not believe that even having a smartphone is a must. I think you can live a life without one if you want to. Our plan is, our loose strategy is that they will grow up in a home where there is a landline and their friends can call. They can come over anytime. I always say I'm better at answering the door than answering the phone. And so open door policy, come on over, in and out. Friends are welcome. We're kind of the low tech hangout zone. Everybody in the neighborhood knows, just leave your phones at home and come on over. We'll probably have a sprinkler. We'll have a fire going, whatever's sort of happening at the moment. We're going to make it fun, but we're going to make it together, and we're going to make it free from the sort of the culture of devices. And I think that's the difference. I don't think it's about devices. I think it's about the culture that devices create, which is that our job as humans is to consume and not create.
I love that. Now, I know from personal experience, and you have been online, so you know from personal experience as well, that there are going to be moms listening to this, or even dads listening to this, feeling triggered right now because we tend to consume information very heavily through the filter of whatever our own priorities, our own convictions, and that could go either way, either our conviction to do something or our conviction that we shouldn't be doing something, even though we are. And that might be feeling like this is a really judgmental way to view life, and kind of, how dare you say that if I have Mario Kart, tournaments with my kids on a regular basis, I'm not actually connecting with them, or, it's easy to extrapolate this idea that y'all are the house on the block without the phones, and that makes y'all, quote, better. Can you talk to me about how we can disentangle maybe some of the morality of it from the practicality of it, or if we can?
Yeah. I mean, I will just start. This is not a salvation issue at all.
Right. Right.
It's for me, the reason I have drawn the line with algorithms and not with Mario Kart, Nintendo, whatever, is I think the second we feel like something has a hold on our hearts, which we're very in tune to as parents and in ourselves as Christians, I believe we have the gift of the Holy Spirit. And we recognize when something feels like it's moving from the space of serving us to us serving them and all of that. And so for me, my big conviction with the usage of social media was that no, technology is not a salvation issue, but idol worship is. And
preach.
I felt I will be honest, scrolling through my camera roll and seeing how many photos I took of my kids or of our home or of our space or for whatever reason, that felt as if I was living from a place of ownership in my life. I don't own my life. God owns my life. And I don't want to participate in practices that make me feel like I have all the control over the world of what happens to my kids or myself, or even just kind of the cropping and the editing, the practice of that felt very much as if I could control the narrative, all of those small ways and nuances, just that even the phone and the wallpaper, right? Like the wallpaper, we have the cute beach scene of our family, right, on our device or whatever. One of the first things I did was I made that screen black because I wanted to send the message to my brain that this is a phone, not my phone. This is not this is not something I want to bow to or hunch over. And it felt as if, for me, that was what the smartphone was. It was this really easy button that made all of these convenient things happen for me. We know, I think you are so beautiful about saying this, that easier is not better and convenience is not better. And for however many conveniences the smartphone provides, it also provides sort of an inconvenience on the other end of that. It's so much easier to furnish a home. It's also easier to neglect a home. And so when I think of smartphone usage in terms of salvation issue, or should I feel triggered by having one, or should I feel offended, or make this into a bigger morality issue than it is, that's not my goal. My goal is not to make you feel guilty or even convicted about your tech usage. That's the Holy Spirit's job, and He is very gracious to do it. I just know I was convicted, and I chose to do something about that. And I will say, I am somebody that does not like to ruffle feathers at all in the slightest. It is very hard for me to talk about this and picture someone that feels triggered or someone that feels as if there's no way out. And so I want to approach this from a place of hope that I know we can do this better if we want to, and if we feel called to. And that is a big distinction to make. If you, I love the example that you're offering here, Abbie. Like you feel as if you were called to this space, and you were doing a wonderful job of shepherding young women and mothers and redefining even biblical motherhood. I think it's important to note that you even say you're a Bible believing Christian, and that seems really interesting that you have to say that you're Bible believing and also a Christian, but you do in this world. It's the lines are blurry. So anyway, I would say my hope is that no one does. I hope I'm not being offensive. And yet I do know that this book was a mission to be bold and to just bravely state the research, and here's what I know, here's what I found, and here's what we can do next. And that is a decision every parent must make.
Absolutely. 100%. And I resonate with so much of what you're saying. And I feel myself thinking, okay, Lord, this is a really good reminder to step back and say, what aspects. So there was a moment where, I won't go down the whole rabbit hole of the reason for it, where there was kind of a crisis, and that's probably not too strong of a term, though it does sound really loaded, with social media several years ago. And I remember telling my husband, say the word and I will walk away. And I felt it. Like, it was like, this could go away today and it would be fine. And in the end, he ended up scrolling through my feed and saying, no, I think you're supposed to be here. I see what's happening, and I see the people that are interacting, and you're showing me these DMs, and at least not yet, I think. And so I would love to talk a little bit about that concept, because I guarantee you there are moms listening that are like, yes, this is my heart, screen free all the way. I'm so sick of video games. I'm so sick of, just binging on shows, and everybody has their head down over their phones, and this is not the life I was wanting, but they don't have a husband on board. It sounds like your husband is. Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah. And honestly, that's a bulk of why. So later in the book, I talk a lot about like what happens if you have adapted to your phone, or what happens if you have kind of gone into this space where you feel as if you are no longer, your kids get older, they make their own choices. We can't control everything. And, which is why it is important to state that I think idol worship can go both ways on the other end too, where we can say like, no, we identify as a screen-free family. Nobody can do this, right?
Yes.
Because once they're out in the world, it's their choice. Our only goal here while they're in our home is teach them what to love, point them toward it, and show them how good that can feel, and let them make their choices on the other end. I hope that we have made an engaging environment to win them over for this type of life. And yet, I think the minute that we're kind of gripping that too tightly as our identity, then we've lost the ship, because then we're not really looking to God to guide us anyway.
Yeah.
And so I would say for the parents who do feel as if they have sort of lost that influence in their child's life, or whether just by by time, years, they're no longer the number one influence because the child isn't living their home, or just that they have set up an environment in which we are gravitated towards screens, and that's just what we do. There is absolutely always time and room and space to course correct. And one of the things that I offer to families is directly from Meta. They have, when there is content that is sort of inappropriate, whether that's a usage of content or content itself, whether it's disturbing, whether or not you find that you're spending too much time on Meta, whatever it is. They have sort of a report, remove, inform system. So you can either, remove the account that is disturbing. You can kind of anonymously report them. You can set up a bunch of boundaries around your tech usage, which we know how to do this already, right? We can make a room into a tech-free zone where there is just a fire going, your favorite reads, whatever. You can sort of replace those rhythms. You can make a time. You can have tech-free Sabbaths. There are lots of sort of ways to kind of recreate what Meta does already with their removal systems. But then also, I like the inform option. So one way that I suggest parents do this is what I heard overwhelmingly from kids and teens that I spoke with was, I can't talk to my parents about what's happening on my phone because they'll take it away. And I get it. That feels really scary because a lot of children have built their lives on these devices, and it is their social hub. And also, they don't want to get in trouble, right? So they don't want to be upfront about what they were doing on the phone in the first place. And so the inform system is really just, you have just, a suggestion box on your kitchen counter or whatever, and let your teens or let your older kids, I'm not an advocate for having anybody under 18 on social media. I will just say that. But if you are, and if they are on there already, the most important thing that you can do, I believe, is to keep that line of communication open. And so just keep a suggestion box on the counter that just, what did I see online? Good or bad, just have it be a dumping ground for what everybody is seeing or engaging with online that week. I saw this and it brought up an interesting question. I saw this and I didn't know what it meant. What do you guys think? It can be totally anonymous, but it can spark for really great conversations. And so just inviting parents to allow that or have that system built in place to talk about it. And so then now we're approaching this from the standpoint of togetherness rather than isolation. And that makes a really big difference in the experience as a whole.
100%. I'm smiling at what you're saying because while I'm not disagreeing at all, I'm laughing at the homeschool mom who really truly believes her child is going to be totally anonymous when we taught them how to write. So we probably know their handwriting.
You're right. That's true. I know. As a fellow homeschool mother, I absolutely agree. And yes, the little ones can draw pictures.
There you go.
Not yet fluent in copywriting.
Yeah. So you did answer a question I was going to ask, and that was kind of how do you course correct, especially with older kids. So we have a 16 and an 18-year-old, 18-year-old, and they both have their own smartphones. We have some, they have some limits on them, and we have no closed doors policies on them. And they know that at any point we can pick up their phones and check their texts and their browser history, and we do. And I mean, even 18-year-old is like, yep, here's my phone, because like he'll put his phone, I'll find it on a chair in the hallway because he's going to the bathroom. So he still lives at home. So there's some things that we have set in place, and yet, and they aren't on social media, and don't have much interest in it. And, that's not where they're spending their time. They're spending their time with real people. And the main thing that we have seen them using their phones for, if it's not during a time when kind of it's like a set, we're going to play a game. And, you're on your phone to play. I'm not good at phone games. I mean, I do know the ones that I don't want them playing, but, I've seen my kid play this complicated, puzzle game. And I'm like, I don't know what that one's called, but I'm okay with that one, kind of thing. But unless it's like, hey, you've done this, you've got this time to do this. You're going to spend, you're 16 years old or 18 years old, or you're going to choose to spend your time with this way. I'm okay with that. But there are things that I'm like, okay, I see that upticking, or I want to be more mindful of that. And it does feel kind of intimidating. as the mom of 16 and an 18-year-old to be like, okay, we're going to course correct. But I love that your advice is to be bold about it and to say, remember, the goal here is not to, is it C.S. Lewis or Spurgeon or somebody talks about the fact that we are idol factories. We're so good at churning out idols in our lives. And it doesn't just have to be smartphones or technology by any stretch. It can be, it could even be these in real life interactions where we're too busy spending our time with face-to-face people to pay attention to the people at our home or things like that. So it's just, we actually do live in a time where there sort of is something new under the sun, as much as Solomon says there's not. The idol making is the part that's not new, but the ways to make those idols, man, it just seems like they keep on multiplying. The thing that I want to circle back to, though, is I'd love to know if you have any insight into when you have two parents that have really different views on technology, like kind of how you reconcile that.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the moms that I spoke with, they were in a co-parenting situation, and the husband worked very much online, and also just there were no boundaries. It was YouTube galore and, whatever else happens. And the mother just didn't agree. And she approached it as she does with every co-parenting situation, whether it's not, they feed the separate foods and do different activities and all of that. With this is something I cannot control. I have to give it over to God. I cannot. The truth is, if we are talking about smartphones replacing relationships, we can also talk about the absence or sort of our obsession with whether or not we're active on smartphones. We can also let that replace our relationship. And so my suggestion is really to pray through what specifically is bothering me about that instance. Is it a safety issue? Is it something that I feel like we need to seek counsel over with our child? Or is this something that I have inflated in my head to make it? Is this something I'm kind of putting in the box that this is another reason why I'm super frustrated with my ex, or something of that scenario? I think we have to kind of check what our motives are too, and say, are we placing such high value on this lifestyle? Are we being billboards for this lifestyle so much that we can't also value and place a high priority on the relationship of the people that we're in? I think that's really what bothers us all about phones and technology. Is it is replacing, it is getting in the way. It is a barrier of our relationships. And I think the opinions that we hold on whether or not it's good or bad or ugly or everything between can do the same thing. So while I don't have any success stories of parents who were able to change the mind of the spouse, I have many success stories of parents that sort of respectfully navigated those boundaries, saying things like, in our house, we do this. In our house, we do this. In our family unit, we do this. Those sort of boundaries. Or if you are, if your spouse is truly not aligned, I would absolutely suggest just putting a day on the calendar and hashing out all of the reasons why each of you believe why you believe, and talking that through. It is absolutely worth a day. It is absolutely worth a weekend away, making it as just very casual. It doesn't need to be a whole thing, but just making it as approachable as possible to talk about some of these things, because there's probably a lot more in common that you have. It's probably just you're not really quite on the same page in terms of the research or in terms of where you want your family to go or be. And I would also say that anytime you're spending time to chat through some of those principles and goals and truths, you're always going to end up in a better spot than not. So if you can just focus that conversation with your spouse on, here's where we want our family to go, and here's what I'm seeing technology getting in the way. Here is this app sort of does this or is a barrier to this. Can we consider our usage with just this app? Or this platform is doing this, this, and this in the hearts of me. What are you noticing? What are you experiencing? I'm going to spend some time off of this area. would you consider joining me? Yes or no? And this is their walk. This is their journey. Our spouses are not us. And I think we can equally lead. When I think of the term united front, I think united front doesn't mean uniformity. It doesn't mean that you both approach things in exactly the same way at exactly the same time. It does mean you're aligned and that you're on the same page about what's the cost versus reward. What are some of the benefits and risks? And so I would encourage parents to have those conversations. I think they're worth it. I think something I learned from Silicon Valley tech, like tech venture funds, whatever. I interviewed them for my book, and I wanted to know, how do you make decisions? How do you make decisions on what to invest in? How do you come up with traction maps and exit strategies for some of these social media platforms that you're taking a chance on? And one of those venture capitalists said to me, you have to train yourself in second order thinking. So it's not about the question at hand, should we as a family be involved in this platform, or is our child ready for a smartphone? Yes or no? It's what happens after that. It is what's next. So yes, we say yes to the smartphone. What's next? How are we going to manage it? What are we going to do if this comes up? Not in a way to sort of fear-based the approach, but in a way to critically think through it. How are we going to handle this transition? Or are we going to offer it as a gift? Or are we going to wait until they can afford it themselves? Or thinking through all of those, what next, I find very helpful in getting on the same page, because you will find that you and your spouse do have some common areas, and you can build from there once you get them all out on the table and sort of know where each other stands.
I love that. I love especially that you're willing to acknowledge that we can even make an idol of how screen-free we are. A couple of other examples I think of is how crunchy we are, how holistic we are in our mindset or our lifestyle, or how traditional we are in aligning with very traditional biblical roles between men and women. We see that in certain movements, and it becomes something where we've lost the thread of do it all to the glory of God. And the goal is to love God and love people. And suddenly the goal is to be the best, fill in whatever category, instead of be the most devoted and the holiest in whatever way the Lord has called us to be that. And so I love that you're giving us the tools to not say, it's basically that idea of, but we didn't know, but how could we have known that? I'm a busy mom. I don't have time to do all of this research. How could I possibly know what all the studies show? This participation in Snapchat or TikTok, or this scrolling, or this, app that allows my kids to, this is something I was talking about at a homeschool conference with my friend Sarah Molitor from Modern Farmhouse Family, and talking about the idea that even something as simple as YouVersion has the ability now, or has had the ability all along, to create these inspirational quotes and Bible verses, which if you change the background to a nude selfie, you could then share with your friends through a Bible app, and kids figured this out. And so their parents were like, great, you're spending time on YouVersion, so it must be good. And I think that's one of the huge detriments of kind of the devious minds that are behind. That took a little bit of deviousness on the kids' side to take something that was not intended for that. But then we see the minds that you've been interviewing that are like, listen, my entire job is to figure out how to get kids and people addicted to this. My entire job is to drive sales and keep people here longer and keep them interested and make sure they spend less time in person-to-person interaction, more time on their phones, because that's how we make money and that's how we keep all of this going.
Yes.
So we become commodities, and most people don't like to think of themselves as commodities, nor should we. So yes, I love that you've done the research for us. I love that you took the time and have that passion that the Lord has given you. The Opt-Out Family, How to Give Your Kids What Technology Can't. That's the best subtitle ever. Erin, thank you so much. I would love for you to end, if you can, with a word of encouragement for our listener who maybe feels like they just jumped off a cliff into the deep end of something that they've either been not known anything about, because we didn't even dive into all the specific statistics. They're all in your book, and you do such a good job of elucidating them. So highly recommend that you don't just kind of put your hand over your eyes and walk into a wall, but instead dive into this and see what it does for your convictions. But also just the mom that's like, I'm kind of scared to go there. I'm a little bit worried about what that looks like. What kind of encouragement do you have for that mom or dad?
I love that we can end in an encouraging space. I always go back to the Bible. You can display the fruits of the Spirit in any circumstance at all. So, when I think of being fearful about what your kids might be exposed to if they're in the public school system and they're using manipulative iPad apps, right? You can display joy and peace in that. You can, if you're wondering when your spouse will ever get on board with the idea of reducing technology in the home, you can pray and display patience.
So good.
We can, all of it, we have access to all of it. And that is a gift to be grateful for. And that is a gift to use and to continually ask for, right? I don't believe that as humans, it is possible to be met with something that is so overwhelming and to not curl up in a ball. And yet we have the hope of a God that is very much in control and who has created us to rely on him for circumstances such as this. And I do believe that it is possible to give kids what technology can't, even if they are in a place where they are currently using technology. It is not something where we have to go retire in the woods in a cabin and turn off the whole world. It is something where there are plenty of principles, just simple ones, putting people over pixels, looking our kids in the eye when they come in the room, smiling, being joyful to see them, being open with them, talking through what their life is like, being a space for counsel and for wisdom and for grace when they mess up, or grace when we think they mess up, but they think they're just living life. All of those things are possible and within our reach. And I think there are ways in which technology can erode those values. But I also think there are ways in which those values display themselves when they are encountering certain aspects of technology. So I would just say you're not lost. You're not too far away from where you feel like God is calling you. I would say read with conviction. It's not something to turn a blind eye to. It is, I think it's very much the sort of new thing under the sun that is worth looking at and worth thinking about and worth considering in much, much prayer. But it is not inevitable. Technology is not something that I think we can just sort of roll over and bend to and accept as this is just life. This is life as usual. We have many tools at our disposal. I hope that this book is one, but the biggest is simply the gift of the Holy Spirit.
Amen. And God's word, because it says very clearly that it doesn't return void, that it gives us what we need for life and godliness, and that God is faithful to respond with wisdom when we seek wisdom from him. Erin, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your encouragement. Thank you for your commitment to engaging and educating other parents about this. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Abbie. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You too.
If you enjoy the MS for Mama podcast, I would be so honored if you would subscribe and follow along, maybe share with friends or even leave a review. And if you want more content on motherhood and biblical responses to cultural issues, be sure to follow along on Instagram at m.is.for.mama.